Hello and welcome to this new edition of the Foojay Podcast. For the next stop of the virtual JUG World Tour, I'm not crossing any borders. Welcome to Belgium.
Welcome to the Foojay Podcast, all your news about OpenJDK.
This Java user group world tour has already brought me to a lot of different countries, but for this episode I decided to stay at home. The Belgian JUG started in 1997 and was the birthplace for Devoxx, Devoxx for Kids and VoxxedDays. And in our capital Brussels we can join BruJUG since 2010. So there's a lot we can talk about to learn more about communities and conferences.
I'm Olivier Hubaut. I'm the manager of the Brussels Java user group. I've been a freelancer in the JVM ecosystem for nearly 20 years now. And so, I'm passionate about everything related to IT, team management, and so on.
Hey, so my name is Stephan Janssen. I founded the Belgian Java user group in '97. The year before, I actually started JCS, which was a Java consulting company in Belgium. And then later on, BeJUG started organizing events, which was JavaPolis, rebranded in 2008 to Devoxx. And that's what I now do part-time, is organize Devoxx Belgium.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Tom Coles. About 13 years ago, I graduated as a high school teacher. I felt too young at the time. I was 21 to go into teaching for the rest of my life and tell people how the world worked when I didn't know it myself. So I decided to transition into tech. So I studied IT, fell in love with Java in school, did my internship at a company called InfoSupport, where I still am today. And for InfoSupport, I'm a software consultant, Java community lead, and I'm also a pretty frequent conference speaker at the diverse conferences. And I think more important for this conversation is that I co-founded the AntwerpJUG together with my wife, and I'm currently organizing the Belgian Java user group.
Thank you. And I'm Frank Delporte, technical writer at Azul, doing software stuff more than 30 years since I graduated. Tom, sorry, I'm a bit older. And also joined a bit of the organization of the Belgian JUG the last year. Stephan, as the founder of the BeJUG, can you tell us a bit about its history?
In '95, I was working for a financial consulting company doing corporate and retail banking solutions. And I was living in Australia, in Sydney, for 6 months, doing a migration of a project there. And that's when in '96, I started playing with Java in the evening because I had no family there. So I had to do something. And that's where really the spark of writing Java applets and having JUG moving on your browser screen, that's where the enthusiasm got, because we didn't have any animation at that time in browsers. And then I came back from Australia and I wanted to meet like-minded people. And that's where I started the Belgium Java user group in '97. And basically it was, I think I did events every week in the office of the company I was working at, FICS, it was named. And that's really where I really started networking and finding other people. And it also created a platform for me to start my consulting company. So I think in '98, I started JCS, which was a Java consulting company, which grew really rapidly. I mean, we had like 35 people in 2000. So like 2 years later or 3 years later, and it became too big. So I just decided to sell it because there's always this decision point when you reach a certain number of employees, is that either you become a full-time CEO, or you want to stay a CTO and do technical stuff. So I decided to sell the company so I could continue doing technical stuff. And it's actually in that time, in 2001, that I then also, because I had a bit of financial buffer, that I decided to actually, with the Java user group, start a one-day conference, which was JavaPolis.
So you say you started the BeJUG. Was it you organizing everything, or did you have a team around you, volunteers?
Yeah, there were definitely different people that I actually dragged into the journey, for sure. One person was Dieter Derremoot. He used to work at Sun Microsystems at that time. It's hard to remember. I should really do a lookup of all the different people. I know, like Joe Waynes, and there were lots of people that basically were starting to see the same enthusiasm of the potential that Java brought, and they basically helped. But it was me who put the signature on the VZW, the non-profit organization. And then really when it turned into a one-day conference, I had to actually go into a more legal entity, because a lot of people don't know this, but the first 3 years when I ran JavaPolis, I was losing a lot of money because I was green behind the ears. I had no idea what I was doing. And, if I would not have sold JCS at that time, I would have probably stopped after the first edition, because my wife was constantly saying like, what the hell are you doing? You're just losing money. So luckily I had that financial buffer, and then after 3 years it was break even. And many people, I don't want to mention too many names because I will forget so many, but there were so many people also involved who joined the program committee, the steering committee, and it was like this collaboration amongst peers and developer enthusiasts who helped me push it forward.
Yeah, we've seen that at the last Devoxx, where we had the gathering around what will we do with BeJUG, and we've seen that many people who actually were involved in the first organization were there again. Olivier, to switch to BruJUG, so that's something you started in 2010, or someone else started it and you got involved?
It was actually Natasha Karl that started it. And at the time, I was what Scott Hanselman calls the dark matter of developers. So it's the huge mass of developers which don't go to conference, might not even know which conferences are available to them. And luckily, I noticed a post on LinkedIn, I think back then, saying, if you're interested in Java, let's have a beer in a bar nearby in Brussels. And so I said, yeah, why not? And I went, and that was the kickoff sessions of the BruJUG. And there was Tasha that was explaining what was her vision about what the BruJUG would be, that it should be a way to share freedom, knowledge as free as possible, that to be as inclusive as possible. And so I first started as a simple attendee. And the beginning, like any other community, was quite hard, because you need to have that critical mass of regular attendees that will bring new people and make noise about your events. And we were at the time struggling to find good places and good locations where people would join, because it was happening in the evening in Brussels, and you know that the traffic conditions in Brussels is quite horrible, and so it was a bit of a struggle for us to find. And at that time, I think I had the idea to ask to schools if they were interested in sponsoring the event by providing location. And I was quite lucky to find a school which was at the center of Brussels, basically, and that did offer us for the next 10 years a location for free, where we could welcome our guests and our attendees. And that's how it started. And I think 3 years after the inception, I took over because Tasha decided to take a different path, and I took over and has been in charge since then.
Something I've seen when talking with all these jugs is a lot of them are not organized anymore by the people who started it. So it's really the community who keeps them alive and it just keeps them evolving. Tom, you have a bit of a strange story about the AntwerpJUG, because you call yourself the king of bad timing. That's what I heard during one of your talks.
Yeah, it's not actually the king of bad timing. I usually say the winner of the bad timing awards. So let's rewind a second. I just recovered from a burnout. And during my burnout, I had a lot of soul searching. And I was like, okay, I can't keep doing what I was doing before. I need to do some things that really give me a lot of energy. And what gave me a lot of energy were these community events, going to jugs like Olivier's jug. I was at the BruJUG quite a few times, even spoke there a couple of times. And that was the atmosphere, the feeling that I wanted to have more of in my life. So I decided to found the AntwerpJUG. Now, the bad timing comes when I say that I had my burnout in the summer of 2019, and I recovered around February 2020, which is when I made the Twitter profile. And yeah, let's say March 2020 was a bit of a, are we still going to do this? And 2 months later, I think we were like, yeah, it's not going to last that long. Together with my wife, we said, yeah, we're just going to organize something in May. Let's get going. Let's do it online and we'll see. We did one event online with Helen Scott and Johan Janssen. which had, I believe, no Antwerpian people, but people from all over the world, which was nice in its own sense, but not really what we wanted to do. And then we had one other event that had Billy Corando from the Oracle team online as a hybrid format. And the other speaker, yeah, I'm looking at him. Hi, Frank.
Was me.
Frank was my other speaker because I was watching him online, doing a few fun things with Raspberry Pi. So I was like, hey, Frank, I want someone local because I actually want to have it more local. Let's get this going. But in the end, yeah, COVID lasted a bit longer. The events didn't work out that well. So AntwerpJUG was just pure bad timing in a way.
I guess, Stephan, also for the conferences, should have been a nightmare, I think.
But to be honest, the first lockdown period, I was going like, yoo-hoo, sabbatical, because it is a bit like Groundhog Day doing a conference like Devoxx. I mean, every year it's the same rhythm and you're just repeating yourself. And that's what I say to Mark Hazel as well. I actually have these golden handcuffs because the community expects you to organize this. But after a while, you go like, well, I've experienced all the highs and all the lows, and it's really a challenge to still find new, exciting speakers or topics or experiences. So you need to keep it interesting for the organizer as well. And so that's always a bit of a challenge. But so the first year I was like, oh, I don't have to do Devoxx Belgium. I can just relax, go on holiday. No holidays because you couldn't go on a plane either. So after 1 year, so I decided not to do Devoxx. I didn't want to do a virtual one. We did do a Devoxx Ukraine virtual one, and I just had fun developing a platform to do conferences online. So at least I could still do a bit of coding. But after the second year, I was starting to get really bored, and I really wanted to organize it again. I mean, it was more than enough 1 year of rest. So I was really happy that we skipped 2 editions, and then last year we were able to do it again, our 19th edition, and I was really happy. And I even said it on stage during the welcome keynote. I think, you just see what you're missing when you're unable to organize it. Mm-hmm. And I think I said, I would love to just keep on organizing it until I drop dead. Ideally on stage, that would be nice. Just drop dead on stage. That would be a nice way to go.
After your keynote.
It would be traumatic for a lot of attendees. So maybe not the best idea. But no, so I think the whole pandemic just showed me that I really love doing this, and I would love to do this for many years to come.
Mm-hmm. I think also the community showed it because your attendees were also waiting for the new conference because the tickets sold out in 5 minutes.
Oh, that's crazy, in 5 minutes. So we had luckily we were anticipating this a bit. So we had 2 batches, one batch of 2,200 tickets and another batch of 750 tickets. The first batch was sold out in 5 minutes and the second batch in 2 seconds. So that was like, bloody hell. I mean, the first batch, when it was out in 5 minutes, we were really enthusiastic, what the hell is happening? But then the phones started to ring, and then these companies and so on, they go like, hey, I'm a sponsor, and I had no chance to buy a single ticket, and I promised all the developers in the company they could go. So shit hit the fan very rapidly, and in the afternoon the excitement basically turns 180, and we were a bit depressed, and so luckily we had the second batch, so we were able to actually get a bit of those tickets to the sponsors. And that's why a lot of sponsors said, okay, well, if I can't buy more, I'll have my 1,000 developers ready and just refresh when you open the registration. That's why
and that's what happened.
The other one. Yeah. But we definitely learned from that.
Yeah, you could improve your ticketing system indeed and test it. It was a stress test, I think, for your system.
Well, luckily it was running on Kubernetes, and we had 4 pods, and they barely reached 40%. So scalability with Kubernetes for just that amount was not a problem at all.
I think there's only one other event I know of in entire Belgium that has this amount of ticket sales, and that's Tomorrowland, the best festival in the world, probably. So without a doubt, Devoxx Belgium is the best conference in the world, with just on that metric.
And maybe also one of the biggest, I think, in number of attendees.
Well, since this year, we're not the biggest in Belgium. Well, no, hold on. There's a few angles. So from a Devoxx perspective, Devoxx France has actually surpassed Devoxx Belgium. They sold out in 13 minutes, and they had a total of 3,800 attendees, 3,800 people attending, all in. And next year, they've added a second level in Palais de Congrès, which is the biggest venue you can have in Paris, and they will be able to reach 5,000 people. So Devoxx France is the biggest, but it's only 3 days. So we're still the longest in number of days. And it's for Devoxx France, it's all French, and meaning the majority of the attendees are also from France. So it's more a national event, and Devoxx Belgium is more an international event. But that's totally fine. I mean, I don't have to be the biggest or largest or whatever, because, you know, at Kinepolis, where we have been organizing Devoxx for the last 22 years, I've reached the maximum venue since many years. So if you can't scale vertically, I want to scale horizontally over all the different Devoxxes. And that's really by design.
So COVID had an impact on AntwerpJUG because, that really interrupted your startup and it has interrupted the conferences. What was the effect for BruJUG in Brussels?
The effect was more or less the same. I think we all suffer from the Zoom fatigue, and there were already a lot of big conference that started having their online version, and they were well more equipped than I was. I didn't have any equipment to do a proper recording and to have attendees all over the world and recording those appropriately. So I just decided that it was not worth it to spend efforts and money trying to set up something while there was already all those great contents that were produced online. So we just waited for that the pandemic was over, and then we restarted this year. Basically, it's been a bit harder to restart than I anticipated, because one of the many positive aspects of the pandemic was the increase of remote working, which means that it had, in general, greatly increased the work-life balance of many people. The downside for JUGs and other community events is that there is less people working in Brussels, less commuters, which means that it's a bit more difficult for us to have as many attendees as we used to have. I think that's something we will manage over time and find a new balance.
Yeah, people went from work to JUG to home, and now they have to go from home to JUG to home again. So I think for a lot of people, that's indeed a different approach. And I heard from other JUGs that they're indeed struggling to get people back to the JUG.
I think that also reflects a bit what happened with Devoxx, is that a lot of people are working at home and they use like these 2 days or 3 days events as a team building to get out of your home bubble and actually meet your colleagues in person and have a beer, etc. So I think for the events who are taking over multiple days, it's actually better. But the meetups in the evening, they're definitely struggling all over the place.
Actually, this is a call to action we should do for the JUGs, because people can come to JUGs to really meet people again. So not only colleagues, but also other people from the community. A bit about the history of BeJUG. So you started this, Stephan, a long time ago. But last year, I think it was in September, I was in Prague visiting my Azul colleagues for the first time there. And late in the night, I got a call from Tom, who said, I was on Meetup. I wanted to check the status of BeJUG, and I saw that this Meetup page was open for someone to take it over. What should we do with it? That was actually the rebirth of the BeJUG, together with a session we had at Devoxx. Tom, can you tell us a bit more about this story?
Yeah, of course. So actually, we have to go back a couple of months before, because together with Olivier, myself as AntwerpJUG lead at that time, still desperately trying to get that thing going, and Renato, the leader of the Belgian Scala user group, we sent in a Birds of a Feather session for Devoxx to really entice people to, come on, let's go, we can do this, we're back, Devoxx is back, the meetups can come back as well. And I talked to Stephan as well in a call we had, saying, hey, Stephan, how can you help? How can Devoxx or BeJUG even help us to kickstart these communities again? And I believe Stephan said to me, but why are you asking me what we can do for you? Why don't you ask what the JUGs can do with BeJUG? And I was really thinking about this, and okay. And then indeed one day I open Meetup, and what do I see? That the big orange banner, this Meetup is looking for an organizer. And I texted Stephan like, hey, Stephan, I don't know how this happened, but if I click this button, I'm the new organizer and leader of the JUG, right? It was like doubting. He said, yeah, just go for it. I called you asking like, if I'm going to click this button, I do not want to be alone in this because I want to keep this going. And then I basically reserved the JUG and said that evening, okay, I'm going to be the organizer. My main motivation, the first time I clicked I want to organize was I do not want the JUG, which had 1,200 people or something. I don't want that thing on meetup.com to end up in the hands of some recruiter company that will abuse the good name for vile recruiting purposes and lose a lot of the soul of what it means to have a JUG. So I held on to it. Eventually, a few months forward, we were at the Devoxx, at the BOF session. We had a few nice people that said, oh yeah, let's do this, but we really want to do something together. We all want to get involved. So that's where we set kind of the vision for the JUG moving forward. The vision mainly is anyone can contribute. Everything is on GitHub. We just have an issue list. If you want to host an event, pick up a task. If you want a new logo, this happened recently. We said, hey, I want a new logo for the JUG. And someone from the community just said, hey, I saw this issue on GitHub. I did it. Here's the new logo. What do you think? And it's the new logo of our JUG now. So we tried to make it as collaborative and inclusive as possible. And the first, I actually quickly realized while being at Devoxx that while I wasn't quite sure that I was going to organize it in the end, I realized that I was actually in the ideal position to do that because I've been speaking at conferences. So whenever I wanted a speaker that's a bit more famous, let's say, I could just walk up to them and say, hey, do you want to come? So actually the BOF session was during or right before the speaker dinner. And the BOF ended. I walked straight into the speaker dinner, where I walked to Anna Maria from the Oracle team and said, hey, Anna, you want to be our first speaker? She said yes. And we've been going every month since then. So that's about the story.
So Stephan, the fact that a BOF session at Devoxx re-kicked BeJUG, is that completing the circle?
Sure, absolutely. And again, it's by design, right? I mean, Devoxx is there to enable and connect the dots and try to really, work as a surface to stimulate, collaboration, etc. So for me, it was a no-brainer. I mean, we've been doing BOF sessions for Java user group leaders since many editions. I mean, in the beginning, it was still Oracle basically hosting it, where they were really inviting all the JUG leaders at Devoxx from a European perspective. But yeah, I mean, that's why Devoxx is there. I mean, it's not only knowledge sharing, but it's definitely also allowing people to network. And I think if I would get $1 from all the companies that got started at Devoxx, I mean, I would definitely be a rich person. But just to complement Tom's story, I mean, I actually decided in 2015 to stop with organizing BeJUG. So I basically passed the torch on to Daniel De Luca, Tim Peters, Steen van den Ende, Johan Vos, Hert Leenders, and David Delabassi, who were already part of Devoxx and BeJUG, because I wanted to focus on the Devoxx family and also the VoxxedDays initiative, because I wanted to really, I've been doing Belgium for so many years that I wanted to do the European challenge, just basically, getting new opportunities, but also new challenges for myself. And to be honest, in 2015, it was a bit dormant. It was they did a few events, but they were really not that active. And then, of course, the pandemic happened. And then luckily, the meetup expired. And Tom saw this opportunity, which is great. I mean, I can only applaud his initiative. And that I'm really, really happy. And for sure, the circle is round now.
I can make it even more complete. Actually, the last event that was organized before, it kind of stopped, and then eventually I took over, was the Devoxx speaker mentoring event with IBM Steve Poole in Brussels, where you were as well, Stephan. And that was actually the first speaker event that I ever went to, and that kickstarted my speaking career. So it's also because I remember what the BeJUG did for me in that event that I recently restarted the speaker training for the BeJUG. And we recently had our first, I talked to the Voxxed Brussels person, so that's Stan. And I told him, hey, I have a few new speakers. Could we get maybe a quickie slot to get these people going? And last week, my heart was just so happy to see one of our attendees that was on the speaker training stand on stage and do a really good presentation. And that's, I think, what it's all about, enabling people, making them better, and having a lot of fun with Java in general.
But definitely enabling people is also an important one. A couple of weeks ago at Devoxx UK, I went to a session where 4 speakers who had never presented at a conference before got trained by the London Java user group. And they did an amazing job. And it really, it touched me emotionally just to see these people trying to really get into the traveling circus, because it is really like that. I mean, I go to a lot of Devoxxes and VoxxedDays, and you constantly see the same speakers popping up. But it's really, really important to get also new speakers into this circuit. So we get some new, fresh ideas, new, fresh faces, and also the diversity, etc. So yeah, these initiatives like BeJUG is doing and that we've been enabling is really important, because you have the rockstar usual suspects, but we definitely need to have also, there's so many, I mean, the problem with developers, a lot of them are really introverts and they really are afraid in standing in front of an audience. But once you are able to make that step, it's an eye-opener, and it really opens up so many new doors from multiple perspectives.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that the person who participated in our speaker event recently, what his barrier was, he was quite confident he could stand in front of an audience, but he thought that his topic wasn't relevant. And his topic was, he entered tech as a more senior person in age, not senior as in experience, but he called himself a senior junior developer. And he thought, but this isn't something that conferences would accept. And I was like, no, you don't understand. This is exactly the kind of stories that I want to hear at conferences. And what was one of the nicest moments for me last week during Voxxed Brussels was Ibrahim finished his session, and after the session, people came to him and asked him questions like, "How was your journey? Could I do things a bit differently?" Like, it really had an impact, and I was just like, "See, told you we need these kind of different perspectives, because else it's like Stephan said, it's usual suspects and sometimes maybe a bit too technical focused. Well, it could be a bit of a broader range."
All the recordings of VoxxedDays Brussels are online, I've seen, also the quickies. So let's add a link to that specific session that you're talking about so that people can take a look at it. BruJUG, Olivier, has quite some history. Were you able to introduce new people into speaking with your JUG?
I don't know if we really had people that were presenting into other events, but we definitely organized at least the last 3 years before the pandemic. Each year we had a special session for what we called new blood, for first-time speaker, where we had sessions of maximum 15 minutes, and we had at least 4 people presenting topics that they were interested in. And it had to be somewhat related to Java, somewhat related to IT in general, but it could be quite broad. And I would say that it was indeed some of the most interesting sessions we had, because the perspective were different, because it was topics that were not trending at the moment and that were not already talked over and over and over. So it's definitely interesting that we have experienced speaker talk and explain technologies and developer advocates that are promoting the products, because people don't always have other sources of information. So it's always good to have these as an eye opener, but it's also very important for us to give this stage for anyone. And that's what I always tell to anybody who is willing to give a talk, because that's one of the questions when you register to the meetup is, are you interested in giving a talk? And for people that say yes, well, please just send me a mail, tell me, yes, I would like to give a talk. It doesn't matter if it's your first time. If you're not confident in having a full session, 50 minutes of talk, we can put you in front of a more experienced speaker. So you have your first 15 minutes of talks, and then I would not say the main, but the more experienced talk later on. And we can give you feedback week. But at least you have this opportunity, you have this stage, you have a friendly attendee that are there to support you. And so that's really important for us. Yes.
I think that's an important message if someone thinks about starting to speak, that the JUG audience is not there to judge you. They are really interested. They want to see what you want to talk about. So people should not be afraid to try it out.
Even as an experienced speaker, I usually trial run my sessions at a JUG because it's smaller, it's cozier. And I did a new talk last week at the Utrecht Java user group, and the amount of feedback I got, even small things like you are a bit too fast here. You can really interact with people a bit better than you could at a conference. Plus, I would never send in a new talk to a conference because Stephan will tell you he gets like thousands of abstracts. And I think starting at a JUG is always a good idea because it gives you time to refine your talk, know where the pauses are, know what's interesting to your audience. Because when I create a new talk, I practice it for myself. I practice it to my wife until she gets tired of it. But then I want to move out in the world and see what do other people think? What do they want to hear? Is it resonating with people? And if it isn't, then a JUG is a really good place to start.
And I think a good talk is like good wine. It gets better over time. You need to really refactor it a bit and practice it. And if you do it a couple of times, after the fifth edition or the fifth iteration of a talk, you nailed it. And that's the moment you should submit it to Devoxx if you're not a rockstar speaker. Mm-hmm. The other thing as well is, of course, as an organizer, we also have a bit of a responsibility to protect the speaker. You don't want to throw a speaker in front of 800 people where you have Dimitris taking photos while you're speaking, the videos are streamed, etc., because it's also your reputation on the line. So, you do need to have a bit of confidence and have a bit of a track record. And like Tom says, a Java user group is a perfect ground, a perfect basis to actually nurture your talk and your experience in talking.
Stephan, you already mentioned you moved from Devoxx Belgium to France to VoxxedDays, so you're building an empire of conferences. But I also saw that you actually started organizing Devoxx for Kids already in 2012. I'm involved with Code Dojo, which is a bit the same thing. So I really love the community thing happening again at these events because they really want to inspire kids to not only start programming but also present, work together. What was your motivation to start with the 4Kids?
It's actually a nice anecdote is that my son, who was 11 years at that time, he came to me and he said, "Dad, I want to learn to program." And I was like, I fell off my chair first and I said, "What?" And so I was like looking around and trying to find resources. And well, the problem was that the majority of the resources, and again, this is 11 years ago, were in English. There was actually almost no really tutorials for children. So I went to him and said, like, you know what I'll do? I'll organize a Devoxx for Kids just for you. And that's where it started. So I organized a Devoxx for Kids only for him. And that basically, I was already running Devoxx, so I have all the contacts, etc. And I think we organized it in one of the high schools in Ghent or in Kortrijk. I can't remember because we did multiple ones. I know Tasha also joined from BruJUG, and she really helped with the Now robots, where she really introduced the robotics to children. And I basically got the old gang from Devoxx, like Daniel De Luca joined and many others. And it was a chain reaction. I mean, a lot of parents had the same situation where they have children around 10-ish years, like Arun Gupta, for example. And they basically took the brand Devoxx for Kids and they ran with it. And we started a nonprofit in Europe, one in America, one in South Africa. I think it was 3 continents. And different people basically used the brand. We published everything online. Everything was open sourced. And it was really crazy. It went like this. Even at the moment where we had Devoxx for Kids at Java 1, actually at Oracle, where we had like 500 children during one day in San Francisco. And we're like, bloody hell, this was like really touching a sensitive spot. But the funny thing is that then I said like to my son, like, so are you going to do informatics? And he was like, no, it's not for me. But at least he tried, he looked at it. But he actually said like, one of the things was like, well, if I do informatics, I will just compete with you and everybody will compare me with you. And he didn't want to have that type of competition going. I was like, damn,
Yeah, but being a programmer is indeed not the end goal of Coder Dojo Devoxx for Kids. Like if I look at the kids that come from the organization I did, some are now game developers, some are doing product design and using Arduino in their product design at school. So that's really the thing, is learn to work with computers, what you can achieve with them. But it's indeed great that initiatives like Devoxx for Kids are indeed sharing this content and making it available to everyone.
And the other thing which I think was the most eye-opening from this whole initiative was that I think about 30 to 35% of the children were girls. Mm-hmm. And it really inspired a lot of female attendees to actually go into informatics, because at that age, at 10, well, maybe already, but we had younger children as well, like even 6, 7, 8. At that age, they were not yet manipulated by society in thinking that girls shouldn't be doing IT. And so it is at that age that you actually had to solve the diversity, the gender problem that we have had in the IT business. Mm-hmm. And I think it's getting better. I mean, definitely also in Devoxx and in general, we see a lot more female speakers doing presentations, which like 15 years ago, it was mainly dominant male speakers.
I like to believe that thanks to Coder Dojo and Devoxx for Kids, the last 10 years, the number of girls in IT has been growing. I don't know if it's only our responsibility, but...
Of course not. It's a group effort, of course, right? But you just try to do your 25-cent worth of, added value.
Mm-hmm. I've seen that most jugs use Meetup to organize their stuff. Now, Stephan, with Devoxx, it's a bigger scale. You mentioned Kubernetes already. What kind of machinery do you have to organize everything?
As I told you, when I sold JCAs, I really decided to stay as a developer and really play with technology. And so for me, organizing Devoxx is luckily, all the non-technical things I can delegate to my wife. So again, Tom, working with your wife, she's my partner in crime, and we're very complementary. We spoke about that, Frank, as well at VoxxedDays, Brussels. She's totally not technical, but it's a good thing, because if she would not be there, I would have been bankrupt 10 times in a row, right? Because I'm creative and I like doing things with code, but don't ask me to do accountancy or all those type of things, right? So that's rather important. And so for me, being able to still do development in a way that it benefits Devoxx is really, for me, where I get the excitement, like doing AI, R&D, because I used to do R&D at the financial company. And so still being able to do research and development, but in function of Devoxx or VoxxedDays, that's where I get the pleasure. So building the CFP. I mean, I'm not the best developer, but I'm a very motivated developer. So I'm constantly refactoring, rechanging, and I go to all these events and you learn new things. I go, job runner. Okay, I need to include it in the application. And so after so many iterations, it becomes a stable product. And so the CFP is really like, for me, the conference in a box type of tool, which Devoxx and VoxxedDays uses. And then we have the registration app, which was initiated by Celestino, who got inspired by Devoxx. And I had built a Vaadin application to do registration, but it was like really a nightmare to make it compliant to all the different countries and the legal implications of VAT, etc. And so Celestino said, like, okay, you know what, I'll do this. And he started Alpha.io, which is an open source registration app, really good application. And so those two, Alpha.io and the CFP, and then, of course, WordPress as the website, those three are basically the cornerstones for our software, or how I call it, conference in a box type of software platform. And then people like Casper Kohls, who works at Kortrijk, in Bruges, I think, at Vives, he wrote the digital signage, where we have like these Chrome bits that go into a screen, and then it talks to the CFP and it shows the signage. We had other people who were building the Twitter wall. And that's the whole thing. I mean, like the Twitter wall, it's open source by Sven Peters and his friend. And, people just see it. The enthusiasm is there. They hack on it. They do a buff session. And you get these all smart people who love playing with technology. Like even with Raspberry Pis. I mean, we did Raspberry Pis at a certain moment where you had an NFC wristband. Instead of a badge, you had a wristband with NFC. And then when you went out of the room, you could vote for your talk using a Raspberry Pi NFC voting. And go like, just geeks having fun with technology and trying to apply it to an event. That's where I get, as you can hear, that's where I get the excitement from.
One of the most fun sessions I saw was actually when you were looking for some kind of tool or framework to schedule to make the schedule of Devoxx, and you basically had two competitors on stage, like, okay, you two hash it out, and I'll use whatever comes out of this.
Yeah, we had multiple things, but we even had like these Bluetooth beacons which were really hardware devices, and we spread it. We used like one weekend to go over Antwerp, and we spread it all over the place. And then we built, well, not me, but Mike Segers and Peter Kuterna, they built an Android and iOS app to find the beacons. So you had attendees running in Antwerp searching these beacons, and it's like, oh man, it's just really having fun with technology and see how you can apply it to an event.
There's even some JavaPolis in the mix with the mobile app.
Yes,
done by Gluon.
Yeah, exactly. The mobile app was developed by Gluon first for Java 1, and then they were allowed to make it open source. And then basically Johan Vos suggested or I spoke to Johan Vos, and we used it for Devoxx. So yeah, I mean, again, we're being creative with technology and trying to apply it. And actually, a lot of startups have been created based on that. Like I know, like the Beacon game was a Polish company, I think Scala.io or some Scala company it's called. They commercialized that one. Or even with the NFC wristband, we had PlayPass, which was a startup in Antwerp using it for rock concerts. So it's really nice to see how these ideas, because you can have many ideas, but the execution is, of course, the biggest challenge. So I prefer to do R&D and quick prototypes, and then that's where I stop.
You need someone who keeps an eye on the money.
Yeah. And that should not be me.
Stephan, Devoxx didn't start as Devoxx. It was JavaPolis, I think, originally. There is some history there in the name.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, JavaPolis, the name came basically because we were a Java-centric event run by Belgium Java user group in the beginning of the event. And it was happening in Kinepolis, which we've been organizing it for the last 22 years. So Java, Kinepolis, hey, JavaPolis, great name. So we went for JavaPolis. And I think the first 10 years, roughly, or 8 years, it was fine because we were like still under the radar of Sun Microsystems legal department. But around, I think, 2006, it was still Sun Microsystems. They actually saw like, this JavaPolis event is becoming a bit too big. We should knock on the door and see what we can do. And they basically hit me with the fact that Java is trademarked and you can't use a name which is trademarked, which is definitely fair. Because if you are a trademark owner, you need to protect your mark, your trademark. Otherwise, you can't enforce it. So it was totally fine. I mean, okay, I had lots of sleepless nights. I had nightmares because of this, seriously, because I was like, what will happen? And I went to a marketing company in Kortrijk, and they came up with a new name and said Javoxx, 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 Vox, which is voice in Greek, I think. So the voice of Java developers. Perfect.
Sounds great.
Like nice icons and so on. So I remember that we announced it on the Wednesday, and the Wednesday evening, I immediately got another email from the legal department from Sun Microsystems saying Javoxx is not okay because it's JAV, and that's 3 letters from Java, so it's still too close to the trademark. And I went like, oh man, seriously? So I was like really depressed. And then I remember Robin Mulkers, who used to work at IBM. I don't know, maybe he still works there. He went like, it's okay. Just say Devoxx instead of Javoxx. So the same day, in the morning, we announced Javoxx, and in the evening, we announced, okay, we're going to rebrand it to Devoxx. And we did 2 X's because I wanted to have a unique, I didn't want any search results on Google. So when you entered Devoxx with 1 X, there were still some search results, but with 2 X's, there were no search results. So that was a clean name, which is really great. And just to be safe, I also registered Devoxx with 3 X's, so nobody would create the uncensored version of our event. So Devoxx.com is protected.
Okay.
And since then, it did not have any impact on the attendees. I mean, people knew about the story. I mean, they even, they sympathized with us about the whole scenario. I mean, I didn't really play it publicly, but people knew that it was a forced thing by us to do. And since then, it's Devoxx, and I think it's great. A unique name, strong brands. And maybe as a follow-up, Frank, just while I'm just exciting about this talk, is that the whole franchise thing happened actually because of Antonio Gonçalves. Because I wasn't planning to conquer the world or create an empire. Where's my cat? She's like, but Antonio, he actually came to my place for a weekend, and he was running the Paris Java user group at that time. And he wanted to do a big event with his Paris Java user group, but he knew about my experience where I lost quite a bit of money the first 3 years. And he said, I don't have the financial buffer, so I can't afford doing something. And after 2 bottles of wine, each of us were drinking a bottle of wine, we came we should franchise it. And that's basically where the whole franchise idea started. So Paris JUG did a franchise of the Devoxx brand, and that basically created a whole chain of other new initiatives where either some wanted to rebrand, like Poland was 30 degrees in the past. And just by rebranding, he doubled the number of attendees, he doubled the number of sponsors. And so different organizers saw that as an opportunity to actually increase their attendance.
And how this franchise actually works is that you give them the brand name and also the logic behind it, all the tools.
Yeah. So it's like McDonald's. I mean, I give them the brands, but also all the tooling. So they use the CFP, I host the CFP for them, and I update it on a daily basis. The registration they use, and I get a royalty fee based on the revenue that they make. So that way I can do this as a full-time job. They basically pay my salary.
Yeah, and you can keep experimenting, R&Ding, and trying out different stuff within these tools.
What I love to do. I mean, even if I would not get paid, this is what I want to do.
Yes, sounds great. What are the future plans for Devoxx?
Personally, I think just repeating what we're doing and coming up with great talks is more than enough for me. So just to be clear, I'm not actively looking for other countries or events. They actually contact me and say hey, are you interested in collaborating? A bit like with Tom as well. I mean, he reached out to me, and I'm more than happy to support him in whatever way possible, and just having fun. We'll see what happens. I mean, there's VoxxedDays coming and going because VoxxedDays is this other thing where I think, and that was Mark Hazel's idea, where people were doing a Devoxx for kids. And then I was oh, this was so much fun. Let's do a Devoxx now for big kids. But doing a Devoxx for kids for 40 children and doing a Devoxx for 2,000 big children, it's a big difference. So that's where VoxxedDays came into action, and it's like an incubator where a Java user group can start with a small event like we've done in Belgium or in many other countries, and then maybe grow into a Devoxx like Devoxx Greece has done this year.
Olivier, what are your plans for BruJUG?
I'm currently trying to reach some speaker for the next season because I would like it to be more consistent than it was this year. Also, what I would like maybe to try experimenting see if some people are interested into some more informal session like book reviews and things like that. That's also something I would like to give it a try at least. But more broadly speaking, I'm also looking for volunteers who would like to help me into maintaining the JUG because currently it's a one-man show. I have some friends that help me hold the doors during the sessions, but that's basically it. So I'm not looking for sponsor or anything like that, but just more enthusiasts are willing to look over for other speakers, maybe give talks themselves, help organizing stuff. Yeah, just normal JUG stuff.
Yeah, and the same question for BeJUG, Tom. There is a cooperation between BruJUG and BeJUG because, Belgium is not that big. So what are the plans there?
So Olivier and I talk on occasion. So the next event will actually be in Brussels. We got Grace Janssen from the Janssen family, which Stephan had a nice picture with recently. And Emily Zhang from IBM are coming to Brussels in June. So that's not announced yet, but it will be on Meetup soon. And then in July, we have one more event called the Brazil event because we actually have a big name. Bruno Java Souza is coming over to Europe, and I asked him, hey, do you want to jump by? It's the Belgian JUG, and AntwerpJUG never got this kind of response. When you say it's the Belgian JUG, everyone wants to come. So that's a bit of a luxury position we're in. And then it becomes a bit tricky because I'm becoming a father for the first time in August. And I have, as I said, we've open sourced the JUG, so anyone can host an event. There are some guidelines. As long as you obey the guidelines, then anyone can host it. So it's going to be a bit interesting to see if it actually works without me tightly holding the reins. But I'm pretty confident we will. One of the other events that I'm looking forward to, and that actually ties in with what maybe Stephan wants to still say, is since we have this speaker training event, I know that the Devoxx CFP is opening tomorrow. I'm looking at Stephan. Yeah, tomorrow. Yes. So that's the 1st of June, because I don't know when this recording is going up. And we'll actually have a speaker training, but then focused on the abstract. The previous speaker training was just feeling confident, how to speak, give some feedback on the general presentation. But this one will be specifically about writing an abstract to help some speakers write abstracts that are not immediately shut down or just contains some silly mistakes that get filtered out immediately. And one thing that I want to point out, because it's something that's been on my list since day one that I took over, there's actually a other user group called Women Code BE, which is a meetup group just for women, so they can find a group and then stick together, because it's quite daunting as a woman to just go into a pretty male-dominated user group. And this is kind of a jumpstart user group where a bunch of women get together, they make friends, and then they go to other user groups. And I was in contact with one of the leaders of that group, and she said, "Oh, we actually have an interest in Java, but we don't know where to go." And I said, "Excellent, let's collaborate on this." So somewhere in October or November, we're going to do a joint event together and bring Women Code BE and the Belgian Java user group together to introduce more people that way. So that's something I'm very, very excited about.
Nice.
A lot to look forward to. Okay. Anything you want to add still?
Well, just as a promo is this, yes, the call for papers will open from the 1st of June till mid-July. And registrations will open on the 16th of August at 9 o'clock sharp. And we'll probably sell out 5 minutes later as well again. But we'll do 2 batches. So hopefully you'll be able to get the second batch. And the reason why we're doing it in August is that once we've declined and accepted all the speakers, people who did not get in as a speaker can still at least try to get a ticket. So that's why we've moved registration after the CFP. Mm-hmm. The only downside of doing that is that we also have community reviews where people can actually review talks. And this is also actually interesting. I know Tom has been doing this already for a couple of times, is that as a user group leader, you actually see all the talks and speakers passing by, which can also give you some type of ideas to invite them, if or if not, they get selected for Devoxx, that they could speak at your Java user group.
Oh, my marvelous plan has just been displayed like this.
Well, there's multiple Java user group leaders who do this. I know also the guys from the Netherlands do the same thing, which I'm totally fine with. So yeah, that's why it's called community review.
And having a good CFP proposal is indeed important, because I cannot remember the numbers correctly, but it was about 700 proposals for 120 talks last Devoxx.
Oh, no, it's much more. It's 1,000 proposals for 220 slots, but we limit the number of proposals to 3 proposals per speaker, because in the past we did unlimited, and then you have like Simon Ritter publishing his 20 talks that he can do. So it becomes a nightmare, of course. But yeah, you can submit 3 talks.
A call for everyone to do that for the next Devoxx. And that's, by the way, the easiest way to get a ticket.
Absolutely. You get a free ticket, you're invited to the dinner, etc. So it's definitely a VIP experience to go to Devoxx for sure.
If I can add one more thing. From the BeJUG perspective, I haven't discussed this with Stephan yet, but I would like to do something around Devoxx, like outside the venue, maybe a city tour or something. So if anyone has any nice ideas, just get in touch. I'm pretty sure we'll list the GitHub page where people can leave their ideas or pick up tasks. Just get in touch and join us. It's so much fun to guide people around and just have some fun.
Tom is basically the Chinese volunteer to do the speaker tour in Antwerp, and basically we've officialized it via this podcast.
My wife and unborn child disagree for this year, I'm afraid, but we'll see what I can do.
If you come to Ypres with Devoxx, I will do the tour.
Well, I mean, there are some funny anecdotes, but I'll keep them for the opening keynote this year. But I could tell you some stories of speakers, why they actually speak at Devoxx, but that's for later.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining this podcast recording, sharing your experience and all the history of the jugs. Also, thank you, the listeners, of course. Keep an eye on Foojay for future articles about development and everything related to the Java world.
Give me a foo, give me a J, give me the friends of OpenJDK.